Morning, everybody. Shabbat Shalom, and to all of you who know the biblical calendar and follow the biblical calendar, a meaningful Rosh Chodesh Av to you. This is the first day of the moon cycle of Av. Have 9 days to begin this moon cycle that are intense introspection and realizing where we came from and how we got here and why things didn't go right and what we had to do with it and what we can do about it. So that's the first 9 days till we get to the Tisha B'Av, 9th of Av, and the season begins to shift, and we begin to come to a turning point, and we begin to consider the rest of the month Menachem Av, which is the term which means the comfort, the consolation of the Father. And that begins to come to us in the beginning of the 10th day of Av. So again, Shabbat Shalom to all who will tune in for us for all over the world. We thank you for joining us and letting us be a part of your day, of your Sabbath day. We are here to hopefully be of some assistance to those who are here in the building with me, to those who are watching by internet or by other means. We hope to serve a little bit of a purpose to help you absorb, receive, embrace, and make part of you the Kedusha, the special holiness factor of this day, of this Sabbath, of the Sabbath in general, but in this particular Sabbath as well. This Sabbath we have the interesting challenge, I call it, to finish the book of Numbers, the fourth book of the Torah. We have come such a long way. And basically, we are concluding our journey, the travels, the trip back home that we started, that was prophesied back in Genesis 15, when the Holy One told Abraham that his descendants would be strangers, they would be captives, would be imprisoned in a foreign land and oppressed by foreign people, but that they would be brought out and they would be brought back and they would return to this land. Well, we are completing that journey. This is we have traveled all we're going to travel till we actually step foot in the Jordan come springtime, and we begin to step into that water and we begin to enter the promised land. So we have come through the major stages of the journey, and now we stand on the plains of Moab. In the shadow of Mount Nebo was the physical location we will talk about in this parsha, this series of parshas. And as we conclude the book of Numbers, the wilderness wandering period that we have been engaged in, we look forward to what's on the other side. What is the next phase? What is our responsibility in the next stage of our journey? Moshe will spend the next several weeks in the book of Deuteronomy laying out for us a plan, an action plan, a roadmap, as it were, as to what we are supposed to do when we cross that Jordan, when we cross that land, when we enter into the next phase. I always try to remind myself during this period of time that Moshe and Yeshua looked at Bnei Israel from two different perspectives. That's not too shocking because of the nature of Moshe and the nature of Yeshua, but the perspectives are this, that Moshe always spoke to Bnei Israel as a nation up and coming who would take possession, who was going into possession of the land, who was going into their destiny. Yeshua, on the other hand, always spoke to Bnei Israel as a nation who was going into captivity, going into diaspora, going into dispersion, going into oppression, and was going into a series of nations and situations where they were going to be not in control, not in power, not able to manifest their national nature, but instead would be responsible individually and as families to let the light of the Holy One shine into the darkest places of the world. That's the way Yeshua talked to Bnei Israel. And so he began to talk about individual and familial responsibility in ways that Moshe never talked about. Moshe talked about the nation. Moshe talked about how we are to learn how we are part of something grand and part of something huge. And our biggest responsibility is not to sabotage what the nation of Bnei Israel is called to do. Yeshua saying, that nation is still there. That nation will come back. But in the meantime, individually, you have responsibilities so deep. What you do affects the world wherever you are. So that's the difference in the process. I call this parsha, or these series of parshas, because there's actually two of them, our final preparations mentally, emotionally, and spiritually for entering and redeeming, and bringing healing to, and rightly stewarding the land of promise. The book is going to culminate. All these two parshas are going to end at a certain portion. It will be Numbers chapter 36, verse 13. The last verse of this whole section, of the whole book of Numbers, of the whole wilderness journey that we've talked about, will be Numbers 36:13. And it will read as follows. And this is important that we understand where we're going so that we know where we are and what we're doing when we're there. The last verse of the fourth book of the Torah, the last book before Deuteronomy begins, is Ele ha-mitzvot ha-mishpatim. And these are the instructions and the decrees, Asher tzivah Adonai b'yad Moshe, that the Holy One put in Moshe's hand, El b'nei Yisrael, for b'nei Yisrael, be'arvot Moab, on Moab's plateau or plain, al Yarden Jericho, across the Jordan River from Jericho. Now, Jericho is right across the river. Jericho is right there. Our first step in the ultimate destiny lies before us. But we have a transition to make because we are wilderness people about to enter a land, and we are to possess and redeem and bring healing to and release the wisdom and kindness and the goodness and the light and the Kedusha of the Holy One into, and then let it radiate into the world. We're about to make a transition here. And then knowing where we're going to be finishing up, looking out longingly over the Jordan River toward the land where Jericho sits and the mission that we are called to do. So people, get ready. There's a change coming. Our time in the wilderness is coming to an end. But we are coming on the clock. We're on the clock now. Whenever we step across that Jordan, whenever we step into the water and we step across and outside that water, we're on the clock. Our annual season, when we come to the point, so now we have to do what you set us here to do, and do it well, and do it effectively, or we're going to come back and do it again next year, and we're going to keep coming back year after year. Now, I have a granddaughter who is right now 7 years old, and she is gifted in an amazing way with many ways, but one of them is art. She can draw, she can freehand, she can do all sorts of stuff. But at this stage, she is setting in to decide whether she is a freehand artist or whether she is a programmed artist. And so she's watching, working with her, and we're watching on things online as to how to draw this and how to draw that. And they give her a system, a plan as to how to draw a cat or a dog or whatever it may be, a horse, whatever it may be. Well, this is a challenge for her because she is a perfectionist, but she sees it in her head first. Now she's having to see it through somebody else's head. Now, what that means is that I hand her blank sheet of paper, and usually she just goes. But now we're training. We're training to be very responsible to make things look the way they're supposed to look, according to the other image that someone else has made for her. And so she begins to try to draw exactly what they've drawn, and it's hard for her because she's a freehand artist. She's a free spirit. And so immediately what she does is she draws one line or one curve or one portion of the image, and she's dissatisfied with it. She takes it, she tears it up and throws it away. Bata, can I have another piece of paper? Pause the video. Get her another piece of paper, get the pen, get the pencil, get the artwork. And she does, and again, tears it up, throws it away. Pata, can I have another piece of paper? Can you restart it? Can we do it again? Now, this is our lifestyle here when you think about it. Torah is the image we're supposed to be drawing. It is the picture of life that we're supposed to be building, the kind of life, well-lived life that we're supposed to be living. But we're like my little granddaughter. We try something, it doesn't work, we want to water it up, throw it away, and get another start. Well, he gives us another start every year. Every year we go through this cycle, and here we are. So people, get ready. There's a change coming. Numbers 30, verse 1 through Numbers 36, verse 13. Our corresponding readings from the prophets this week will be Jeremiah 1:1 and then basically through 4:2. There's two sets of those. And then the Brit Hadashah, we'll be reading or discussing Philippians 3:12 through 16, and the book of James, chapter 4, verses 1 through 12. We won't actually discuss those today. We won't have time, but I want you to have that to read. Here are some basic questions we face as we step and look across that divide as to the next phase of what we're called to do, the next level at which we're called to be creative and release the image that the Torah has made for us and designed for us. The first basic question is, are you ready for the next phase of covenant responsibility? Now, here's the deal as we stand and look across the Jordan Rift Valley, or as we look into the destiny of the kind of life we're supposed to live. We've been here before. Avram, our ancestor, was here before. And Yaakov was here before. Jacob, our ancestor, was here before. And especially with regard to Yaakov, I'll leave the Abrahamic situation for another day for you to think about. Because Abraham came, but then Yaakov came 2 generations later. And when Yaakov came, he brought his children with him, all of his children with him, which are going to be the tribes that are, we've been here before. We were here in our ancestors. And so Yaakov came before. Now what happened? Why are we coming back? Why are we coming back as opposed to having stayed there? Well, there was a promise because Avram, the Holy One, is omniscient, and he knows what's going to happen, and he's told Avram that there was going to be a problem, and we were going to be sent out in captivity, and we would come back. So the fact that the Holy One prophesied it is known and understood. But there were 2 events that happened in the land that under Yaakov, under the season when Yaakov and his family came, 2 major events that made it impossible for us to stay. Wad it up, throw it away, and say, Bata, can I have another piece of paper to draw on, please? What were those 2 events? The 2 events were Shechem and the overreaction without divine instruction of Yaakov's sons, eldest sons in particular, to a horrible situation involving Dinah, the daughter, at Shechem, and how they colluded, they lied, they brought forth a false covenant, and then they actually surreptitiously attacked without provocation and killed people who were innocent of the entire process, as well as the one who was. And that was the Shechem debacle that took place. And what we did was pollute the land that was our land of promise, that was the land of our destiny, that was the land of the beachhead of the kingdom upon the earth. We polluted that land with innocent blood, as well as some guilty blood. But the innocent blood's what cried out. Well, that was step 1. Step 2, there was the disaster at Dothan. This wasn't somebody else we attacked. This was one of our own. We just didn't like that guy, that dreamer, Joseph. I mean, is he really one of us even? We don't like him. We don't like his ways. We don't trust him. And we developed this hatred, this intense disgust as the older brothers toward Joseph. And man, you know the story, right? It wasn't pretty. And it's disgusting to read as to how brothers would treat their own kin. But that's what we did. So we have the way in which we treated the world around us, those we saw as adversaries of the world, and then those among ourselves who we disagreed with. And this is the whole story of Sinat Chinam, which is what we deal with and what we remember and what we try to avoid stopping our heart from engaging in. Sinat Chinam. And this is the words that are usually translated as baseless hatred. And they are the reason for which we say the temples were destroyed and we were sent out into captivity again, and we have to go through this process again because we engaged and indulged, sinat chinam. The literal phrasing of the little meaning of the term is not baseless hatred, because that makes you think there is based hatred. Baseless hatred suggests that there could be a based hatred, and there is not in the kingdom of heaven. Baseless, sinat chinam, means a rejection of the mercy the Holy One wants to give to another person. Hinam, mercy, compassion. In other words, I want you to suffer. I don't want you to be forgiven. I want you to have justice, the way I look at it, the way I interpret it. I don't want you to have mercy, forgiveness, redemption, restoration. And that is the difficulty. As we go back, as we turn into the next phase, as we are offered another opportunity to go into the land, another piece of paper to draw our image on, the issue is, are we going to carry Sinat Chinam in? Are we going to carry it toward the nations? Are we going to carry it toward other members of our own group, of our own nation? Are you ready for the next phase of covenant opportunity? This time, hopefully, without a Shechem massacre. This time, hopefully, without a Dotan debacle. Second question that we face as we finish Bamidbar, the Numbers. With what people groups and institutions and ideologies and philosophies, with what groups and people do you feel a tribal connection? Do you allow yourself to feel part of? How do you, when someone asks you who you are or you think about who you are, what label do you put on yourself? That's your tribe that you choose for yourself. Not the tribe the Holy One gives you. That's the tribe you choose for yourself. Now, which groups, which ideologies, which philosophies, which political sides you choose, which aspects of group or institutional life you choose, will determine your worldview toward other people and whether or not you will embrace Sinat Hinam. If you choose the wrong groups as your tribe, as you associate yourself with the wrong groups, with groups who are full of Sinat Hinam, you will adopt their Sinat Hinam. You will not want your opponents, your irritants, the other people to have mercy. You will want them to be punished and wiped off the face of the earth. You will want them to be injured and hurt and suffer. You will want them to be humiliated and embarrassed. This is the problem and challenge that we face. What tribes do you belong to? Because we are going to be introduced in these parshas, to tribal trouble. It's a phrase I coined. It's one thing to have a tribe. It's another thing to understand the level at which your tribal association affiliation, when you value that more than you value the greater plan of Bnei Israel, when you value something that helps or assists or goes along with what your tribe, that you've claimed, is wanting, as opposed to what the greater good is, when that happens, you're going to have tribal trouble. And it's going to get worse and worse and worse. And it's going to become so bad that it's going to have to be wadded up and thrown away and start again. We can't have tribal trouble in our new world order, the kingdom's world order. So the question was, with what people groups, institutions, ideologies, etc., do you feel a tribal connection? And who do you write off as not worthy of being in your tribe? Who do you write off as not worthy of being not only in your tribe, in your world? Who do you wish was dead? Who do you wish didn't exist? Famous line, the child in the back seat with the little baby brother. Mama, Mama, why did you have him? I don't like him. Who is it you feel that way toward in this world? What group of people? What other tribe? What other ideology? What other political party? What is it you think, I wish you hadn't had him? I don't want them to live in my world. I don't want them to breathe my air. I don't want them to be in my city or my nation. How do you feel about that? So with what people, groups, and institution do you feel a tribal connection, and who do you just write off as not worthy of your world? Third question, to what degree are you, and should you be, willing to subordinate personal, familial, and tribal interests and perspectives to the greater kingdom plan, the plan of redemption? What is the kingdom plan? I'll tell you again, because I know I'd love to speak it. I love to remind myself of it. The creator of the universe has a grand plan for the redemption of mankind as a species, bloodline by bloodline, and nation by nation, and to restore creation to its original intended state of beauty, fruitfulness, and shalom, geographical region by geographical region, geographical coordinate by geographical coordinate, city by city, village by village, tract of land by tract of land. Now, this is the grand plan. Our tribal interest, our familial interest, our personal interest sometimes will be put in conflict with that greater plan. When the conflict occurs, which will we choose? If we're going to be ready to move into the next phase of our plan, we will always subordinate those things or learn to subordinate them to the greater plan. And then what way stations and points of departure along the road that we have traveled do you see as being the most meaningful, the most life-changing, and the most destiny-molding for you? In other words, basically, boiled down shortly, the question is, what lessons have you learned along the way through the wilderness, and what have you not yet learned? One of the most important lessons that we were supposed to learn along this journey through the book of Numbers, boy, has it ever been, is this thing that sits between our chin and our nose is a very dangerous orifice. We do more damage with that little orifice between the nose and the chin than most people do with swords or with bombs. We have this, because we are the sons and daughters of the creator of the universe, because we are clothed with his own persona and carry his kedusha, his holiness, into the world. When we speak, we cannot release the things that the world is releasing. We can't speak their vocabulary. We can't speak their anger, their frustration. We can't speak their complaints. We should have learned along the way that murmuring and complaining is maybe fine for the nations, maybe fine for the pagans. It may be fine for the other tribes, but for our tribe, it is not okay. It will never be okay. It cannot be okay. It is not who we are. We are here to bless, and we are not here to complain and murmur. This is the first lesson, the lesson learning how not to use your tongue, not to use your lips, not to use your voice, not to speak words that are not of the kingdom. Well, complaint is never going to be of the kingdom, ever. There's just no excuses for it. Ranting, profanity, lewd comments. These things are not appropriate for us. They do not fit with the mission. They do not fit with the kingdom. We're not like other people who get to do these things. If we're moving into the next phase, we need to be prepared to speak only blessing, to speak only wisdom, to speak only encouragement. What? Comfort, exhortation, edification? The New Testament's no more silent on this than the Old Testament is, assuming those are right terms in the first place. This is the lesson of the wilderness. Your mouth will get you in trouble, and it will get your world and your environment in trouble. We're not supposed to speak in anger. Moshe? We're not supposed to declare and call people names. We're not supposed to use derogatory labels on people. You rebels. This is the rest of the world does it all the time. I understand. But what is that to us? That is not our business. Our business is to show another way, a more excellent way. And so one of the things about this is learning how not to speak things that the world will interpret as being like them. We have to be giving the kingdom message, the kingdom attitude, the kingdom tone, even the resonance of the frequency of heaven's songs. This is what we are to bring to the earth. And it is a challenge. And sometimes we wad the paper up and it gets thrown away and we have to start all over again. The key is never quit starting over again. Never just surrender to the negativity of the language, of the tongue, to the false labeling. Never say that's normal, that's okay, because it's right. It's not okay and it's not right for us. It may be for anyone else. Well, we're going to begin. The whole process of these two parshas begins again with the tongue. They said, you've learned, I hope you've learned, complaining, murmuring, accusing, labeling, shouting in anger, speaking in rage. These things are not consistent with your new creation identities, with your calling on the earth. We got one more thing we need to talk about with your mouth. Do you realize that the future is the exclusive province of the creator of the universe? What does that mean? That means humanity does not have the authority to declare the future. Now, in particular, as we begin this parsha, he's going to talk about making vows. The Torah never tells you should make vows. Because, you see, making a vow is declaring the future. And that province belongs only to the Creator himself. So he's going to say things like, don't make a vow unless because you're going to set Torah in place. Once you make a vow, you are now responsible for completing it. And you don't know the situation. You don't know the circumstances. You don't know what awaits you. You don't know what's going to happen. So you're making a declaration. You're making a promise. You're making a vow that you're going to do something and you have no control over doing it. The Holy One does because he knows all the things, but you don't. So the vow process is the first thing he wants to talk about. Before you go into the land, before you start making vows and declarations, talking off the top of your head, spewing about stuff you're going to do, understand you don't control any of those factors. And to the extent you do so, you're almost guaranteeing you're going to have a failure. I live in a world where every witness who comes to the witness stand in the courtroom is asked to swear an oath. Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? They used to say, so help me God, but they don't do that anymore. They used to put your hand on the Bible before you said it, but they certainly don't do that anymore. Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in this proceeding? And the witness has got to say either I do or I so affirm. One of those two statements. Well, the problem is they don't know what questions they're going to get asked. And they don't know how good their memory is. And they don't understand that their perspective may not be the truth. Their perspective may just be their perspective. What they think they saw, what they want to believe they saw. What they saw, but it was not complete and wasn't the bigger picture. And so I sit there and watch this vow being broken every single time I go to the court. I've never seen a witness yet be able to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. You will never be able to do that because it is a nonsensical concept that we should do so. Well, this issue of vows, he's going to hit the first chapter of this whole series is going to be about making vows. And he's going to say, not only are you not to make these vows, not to make things you can't do, you're to be very careful of your children and your spouses. We'll get to the details. I'll not go to the details of that. The key factor is to understand is as we go in the next land, as we go in the next journey, the next stage of our journey, the next level of responsibility in the kingdom. I hope you're ready, and I hope you'll learn not to speak things out of turn. Speak things that you think are good because it seems like a good idea to you at the time, realizing that the future belongs to him. The Holy One said, Yeshua said, let your yes be yes and your no be no. Beyond that, anything beyond that, Yeshua, the way he said, it's of the evil one. That's shocking to us. The rest of the world takes vows and makes promises all the time. Makes commitments, long-term commitments is what they're going to do. They're going to pay this amount of money over a period of time to buy that house, to buy that car. We make all these commitments because that's what the world does, but the Holy One says, let your yes be yes and your no be no, for what else is beyond all this is of the evil one, of the self-will beyond. Well, he also says, never say you will do these things. Say, if the Holy One wills, I will do these things. Leave it to let the Holy One have his room to do what he will do. Now, this is a key factor as we go into the land, as we take our next step of responsibility. Learning that our mouth cannot be a loose cannon, just saying what we think or what we want or what we like or what we believe. Our mouth is not ours anymore. Our mouth belongs to the Holy One, and we are vessels for him to use to speak what he wishes to speak out of our mouths. He told Moshe, I will put my words in your mouth. That's what his message is to all of us as we become to step into that role in the higher levels. He will put his words in our mouth. Be careful what else you speak, because the world doesn't know the difference between what came out of his mouth and what comes out of our emotions. What we are and what we have to offer to the world, to the ecosystem of which we are assigned to be managers, and to the kingdom and its mission, is shaped by certain things. One of them is the worldview or lens or filter through which we process external stimuli and life experience. I know it seems like big words. In other words, how we view, through what lenses we view, the stuff that happens to us, the stuff we see, the stuff we hear, the stuff that occurs in front of us, the stuff that sees on the television screens or the internet screens, the stuff that we read about, whether it be in newspapers or online or even in the Bible. How we interpret things is determined by what lens we look at it through. What lens is, we choose. This is why tribal trouble occurs, because we adopt tribal lenses and we look at things through a tribal mindset or ethnic mindset, or sociological group, or economic group labels, or gender labels. That's why Yeshua kept, and his disciples kept saying, there is no longer that. You're not supposed to look at things through those lenses anymore. You're supposed to look at it through the lens of Mashiach, Messiah, Yeshua. And when you look at them through those lenses, you are not dividing it based on how this affects my gender or my race or my ethnicity or my nation. We're looking at how the greater ecosystem is being managed. That's what the one new man is all about in Yeshua. Well, so what lens or worldviews or filters do we look at? Well, the world looks at it mostly through ethnic, age, gender, social, political, partisanship lenses. And no wonder we're a mess. No wonder we're a disaster. No wonder we have no national unity. No wonder we are not having a major influence upon the world. Because if that's the way, those lenses are the way you choose to look at events transpiring in the world, things that you see or happen, the short videos that don't show the whole story of whatever that's always put on the news to impact you and make you think something that if you saw the whole video, you might think something totally different. And if you saw it from a totally different perspective, you'd see it. Now, which lens are you using? That's the first question. And beyond that, the better question, if we're going to be who we are created to be, if we're going to be performing the role that we're called to be, then what lens will we look at through? What should be the lenses that we look at the world through, and we process all the stimuli that we experience, all the things we hear, we see, we feel, we watch. What should be those lenses? Well, the whole books of Exodus and Numbers, and it will also occur in the book of Deuteronomy. It will be the teachings of Yeshua that this is the main lens. The main lens through which we are to interpret everything we see, hear, or understand, or read, or any way affects us, is the Torah of the Holy One. The Torah is his testimony of what a well-lived life on earth is supposed to look like. That's our first lens. That is our critical lens. Not what society thinks about it, not what our physical flesh thinks about it, not what our emotions or our culture or our class or our race or our ethnicity thinks about it. What does the Torah say? What does the Torah of the Holy One say? What does he say is the way in which to interpret and deal with situations like unto this? So the Torah is the first lens. The second lens is tefillah. We've learned how not to respond to a situation or a circumstance or a challenge or an obstacle by talking about it with other people, discussing it, getting all ramped up with our rhetoric about it. We have another way. Our way, our lens, is to take it through the throne room. Tefillah is a Hebrew word which means to absorb light and to shine. To absorb light and to shine. This is where the light of the world, all this, we become like vessels of light with filaments. But we have to address ourselves to the power source, and the power source is the King enthroned. This is not some buddy we're talking to. We're going to see that why. The third lens will tell you why we can't just see him as our buddy, our papa, our daddy, our good friend. We see him high and lifted up, and his train fills the temple, and we stand in awe of who he is. And in that process, we connect with him and reverently ask him what to do with this situation, how we should feel about this, how we should act toward this, what should be our words, what should be our vocabulary. We see him high and lifted up like Isaiah saw him in chapter 6 of his story, like Ezekiel saw him, like John saw him in the book of Revelation. Because the third lens, and the third lens is wisdom and understanding. Chokhmah u'tufunah. So why do I say that the way of looking at him and seeing him enthroned and dealing with him through his tabernacle protocols is essential to the lens of wisdom and understanding? What is the beginning point of wisdom? Reverent fear of the Holy One. If you're not reverent toward him, you will not be able to access his wells of wisdom. Instead, you will treat him with disrespect. You will treat him like a common, ordinary person, and you'll call him cute little names, affectionate little names, which you can get by with a little bit, but whenever you're trying to deal with a real situation, you need to see him for who he is. He's the sovereign God of the universe who has a plan for every situation, and every situation involves his plan, if you can just catch that plan. So look through Torah, the lens of Torah, the lens of tefillah, the lens of wisdom and understanding. That means, what are we supposed to do with this? Holy One, what is your plan? How will we be able to connect with this and do it in a responsible way that brings redemption and restoration to play, as opposed to bringing our emotions into play? And the fourth lens is shalom. We are supposed to be regulated with a balance level of which one hand in heaven, one foot in heaven, in the heavenly realms, in the beauty realm of God, and one foot here on this nasty, dirty earth with all the mess. And that balance, we have the handhold in both, or a foothold in both, as the case may be. And that shalom says it's okay because what's happening here is going to take care of what's happening here. Not what's happening here is going to take care of what's happening here. Not what happens here is going to take care of what happens here. Not what happens here is going to take care of what happens here. What happens here is going to take, in the heavenly realms, in the kingdom's throne, in the king's throne. That's going to take care of, and that's called faith, emunah, trust in the Holy One, as opposed to trust in our own abilities to do things. So this worldview lens filter, we're supposed to have these four lenses operative, not the lenses the rest of the world uses. The fifth, there's not really a fifth one. I call it the blue thread. I call these these four lenses, I call them the four corners of your garment. We're supposed to approach the world with a four-corner garment. And these are the tzitzis. These are the things, the fringes on which we follow the fringe of the Torah, and the fringe of the tefillah, and the fringe of the wisdom and the understanding, and the fringe, and this is how we interact with the world, and the fringe of his shalom. And these four things are the way we center ourselves in the world and let the world not impact us beyond those four things. But there's a blue thread in every tzitzit, in every tassel. There's a blue thread. So what's the blue thread that goes through this entire vision of the perspectives, of the lenses we look at? And that blue thread is the will of God, the will of the King. How does this fit in the will of the King? Not how will it make me feel, not how will it advance my agenda or my class's agenda or my gender's agenda or my ethnicity's agenda or my nation's agenda. How will this impact the will of God? How does it impact the will? How can it impact the will of God? That's the blue thread that goes through all factors. Well, I want to move on. The theme of this book, the fourth book, which we're concluding, is the faithful bridegroom leading his petulant bride in training through the testing seasons of the wilderness. Not just so he can send us through a series of testings in the wilderness, so he can prepare us to enter into our real state, our intended state. Freedom must be walked out day by day. This is the lesson of the wilderness. Freedom must be walked out day by day. It's not something you get and declared over you and it's done. It must be walked out day by day, situation by situation. And by learning the choreography and purpose of the journey in the first place. Why are we in this journey in the first place? That's as important as reaching the destination. Are you ready for the next phase of covenant calling? Are you ready to assume your post? To take up your assigned station? Are you ready to provide a receptor, reflector of the Kedusha influx, of the holiness download that the King wants to present to the world and that the world so desperately needs? Our destiny lies just over the next hill. The question is, who is this coming up from the wilderness? You're coming up from the wilderness, so who are you? And what is your lens? And what is your going to be your impact? And what will you draw on this piece of paper? What will you draw on the script? What will you write? Who is this coming up from the wilderness, leaning on the arm of her beloved? In Parsha Mattot, after discussing the issue of making vows and speaking out of the mouth things that we have no control over, as if we did, misleading the world by saying that we have the control, we have the ability to control things because we feel it, we want to do it. Once we learn not to do that, this is the first key. The second thing is now, the next instruction of the Holy One is Nechom Nigmat B'nai Israel et Hamidyanim. And this is where we have to, now we learn another lesson of the wilderness is, just because an English translation says something does not mean that's the way we automatically should assume it should be read. Nechom Nigmat is the Hebrew phrase that's used, and in English it's translated usually by the King James and New King James and all the other writers basically as take vengeance. Take ultimate vengeance. Nikom Nigmat. For B'nai Israel against the Midianites. This is problematic. Because the Holy One's made it very clear, we're never to take vengeance, right? Vengeance is his, says the Holy One. Man should not take vengeance. So if you read this as take vengeance on behalf of B'nai Israel against Midian, then we're saying, but there's one exception. Just identify your adversary as Midian, and you got it. You're okay. But what if we had to go back and actually parse the actual words Nechom Nigmat? And what would it say if we really looked at the Hebrew phrase as opposed to looking at the English translations? What is Nechom? Nacham, the Hebrew verb. The Hebrew verb Necham merely means to blow forcefully. breathe forcefully, usually on an outward basis. Some people call it blowback. Increase your breathing, increase the volume. So we have this very vague phrase that we're given nakam, and it can mean a range, as every Hebrew verb can mean a range of things. Now, whenever we're going to be responsible people of the kingdom, we have to learn how to understand what the Holy One is saying to us with this particular verb. It's like, we see the verb shema. Shema, it's hard to translate it into English, but if you wanted to, it would be a spectrum. It starts with just tuning your ear. Tune your ear. We're going to hear and listen and tune to and tune out all other sounds and then align with and agree with and then obey. And then repeat and radiate and repeat, rinse and repeat again. That's all in Shema. Well, a similar level of meanings is found in Nakam. And we have to determine, our responsibility is to determine which one the Holy One is saying to us. Which level of nakaming, of blowback, of forceful blowing, are we supposed to make? And we're going to find out that in this parsha, Pinchas and Moshe have a vastly different opinion of what Necham Nikmat means. And that's not to say one is right or one is wrong. It's to say, do you realize people can disagree in this regard? And how they feel about this, where they believe this whole Nikam Nikmat instruction is on the vast continuum of possibilities of what it looks to blow with force, is going to change destinies and change the world, because this is who we are. This is the power we have. Well, the story is going to be like this. Pinchas is going to be sent out as the head of the army to go back and deal with Midian. Midian has just conspired with Moab to destroy us. They brought in Balaam. They wanted to have him curse us. They wanted to destroy us in such a way that they could actually physically then finish up the battle and kill us. That's what Midian and Moab wanted to do. Moab stopped with the prophet, the false prophet, Balaam. It didn't work. They bowed out. But Midian had another way. They then conspired with Balaam to do something else. And they sent their own daughters, the daughters of Midian. Midian decided that we will sacrifice our own daughters on the altar of destroying Israel. And so they send their daughters to, this is the ultimate form of prostitution and horrible ways of human trafficking, and they send their own daughters into our place to distract us, to get our men caught up in it, and somehow or other begin to keep us from our mission, our destiny. And they were very successful, but it was stopped. Pinchas was responsible for stopping it by putting a spear through two who were actually in the tabernacle of the holiest place on earth, and doing this very vile thing there. I won't go into the details. Well, Pinchas is sent out to deal with this, to make a response. Nekam, Nigmat, blow back. Let something happen. So he goes, and they have a war, and they're attacked, and they fight back. They're attacked back. Only 14,000 men, 12,000 men rather, of Israel, against about 100,000 probably of the Midianites, warriors. And 100,000 warriors of Midianites are dead, die in that battle. And 12,000 Israelites come back alive, 100% against 100%, just the opposite direction. A miracle war. That you don't have a war that has no casualties on your side and has complete casualties on the other side. But after the war, after the soldiers were all defeated and there was no more attempt to kill the Israelites, wandering on the hillside and in the villages were widows, now recently widowed women of the Midianites, and their daughters, and their sons, and their livestock, who now had no shepherds. And so Pinchas says enough is enough. We have dealt with the issue of Nechem, and he goes and what are we going to do with these widows and with these orphans and with these homeless animals who have no one to feed them and take care of them? And so Pinchas brings them back to the camp. All the women, all the children, all the animals. And they're going to have to take care of them, be responsible for them. Pinchas says, we've done the Nikmat. And Moshe looks at the situation and he blows a fuse. Again, Moshe is an amazing prophet of God. But Moshe looks at things different. Moshe grew up in a world in which Pharaoh ordered every Hebrew child to be thrown in the Nile, killed on the birthing stool, thrown in the Nile. Moshe had to grow up in that world, and he dealt with that process. And so Moshe sees this, and he interprets Nakam, Nikmat, different than Pinchas does. He says, what have you done leaving these women alive? They're the ones who actually participated. Kill every one of them. Slaughter them, every one. All the way down to the women, the girls, who are of marriageable age. I think it says in our English Bibles. I'll leave you to think what that might mean. Puberty, basically. And so it says that Moshe ordered it. It doesn't say that it was done. It doesn't say that it wasn't. It just doesn't leave it. Just leaves it in the blank. But the issue is not whether it was done or whether it was not done. The issue is, do you understand how people could see things differently? How they can understand and respond to phrases that the Holy One has spoken. It's not so easy as just obeying an English command. You have to figure out what it means. At what level? To what degree? What are you being called to do? This is the lens of Torah and learning why you can't just rely upon written Torah. You must have the tefillah. And you must have the wisdom and understanding that comes from your tefillah. And you must have the understanding of shalom, that you will not in any way depart from the plan of the Holy One. So we have this first lesson, a very important lesson. Other people may look at the instructions of the Torah differently than you do. The natural thing of the world and the perspective and the viewpoint of the world is to say one's right and one's wrong. Usually that's not going to be the case. Usually that's a product of tribalism and ethnicism and genderism and other types of associations and affiliations and lenses that we are not applying. This is why the Talmud, to me, is so fascinating. Because, you see, we have people who totally disagree on the interpretation of a particular passage in the same book. Both have accorded respect. One's right, one's wrong, who knows? It's not even the issue. The issue is, can you appreciate someone else's perspective if they're trying to interpret the voice and the message of the Holy One? So we have this issue. We have the fact that, well, let's talk about this. Because it's important where we are right now in our life, and before we go into the next phase. How do you think about, look at, talk about, and deal with people who are not and who want no part of you or the kingdom? How do you deal with them? How do you think about them? If they're not doing what you're doing, if they're not seeing what you're seeing, if they don't value what you value, if they don't work in the same ways for the same purposes, if they're not, then how do you choose to see them, speak of them, think of them, behave toward them? Do you see them as, I've got a list of things here, nuisances? Are they just nuisances? Do you just, well, I wish they weren't there. Are they irritants? Are they irritating you? Do you respond? Is your flesh responding to them? You see them and you just get ticked off. You see them on the news, or you see them in the store, or you see them on the street, and it just immediately sort of react in the flesh to them. Are they irritants to you? Or are they nuisances? Are they irritants? Do you consider them competition? Are they competing with you for money, for jobs, for reputation, for joy, for fun, for vacation spots? Are they competing? Are they competitors? Do you see them as fools or insane? I know one particular political group that calls the other ones, insane. Do you think other people who don't think like you, who aren't moved by the same things you're moved by, are they insane? Are they retarded? Are they crazy? Are you allowing your mind to go down this road that they just don't have any sense and that's why they're stupid and they're... Next question. Are they opponents that you have to be fighting against at all times? Are you a warrior looking for somebody to take on, to challenge? Are they an opponent to you? Are they an oppressor to you? They make you feel little. They make you feel small, unimportant. Do they affect you that way? Do they make you feel powerless? Do they threaten you? Are they a threat to you emotionally and as a person? Do you feel threatened by who they are? Are they just disgusting pagans? Be careful about calling people and thinking about people disgusting pagans. You may need them someday. At any rate, and you may be called to bring them into a Ruth scenario someday. Are they evil people who don't deserve to share the planet with you and your kids? Or are they an existential threat to you, to your well-being? Now, the reason I give you these lists is because most of us never think stuff like this. We just assume someone's on the other side of us. We immediately don't even think about how much of a threat they are or not. We don't think about what possibilities might be of their redemption. We just think how we don't like them. Mama, why did you have him? I don't like him. Most of us just think like that. Now, the Holy One says, if you're going to be my people, you need to learn who is a real danger, who is a real threat to the ecosystem, who is a real danger to the kingdom and to the plan, and who is just an irritant to you, who is designed to help you learn how to overcome your own flesh problems. Not give in to them. Not lose your shalom because somebody is out there saying something you don't like or doing something you disapprove of. What's a real threat and what is not? This is the challenge that we've got. Now, Midian is, how do you perceive it? Do you perceive the Midian world of being an existential threat like Moshe did? Or as needed just a blowback that would stop this immediate threat, which is what killing the warriors in battle did, like Pinchas saw. We will have to determine how we look at things. And before we enter the land, before we are given this next phase of kingdom importance and kingdom relevance to the world, and I'm saying this, I'm not talking about physically going into the land of Israel. I hope we do that soon. I'm talking about in the next season, we're on call. We're on the clock. Will we indeed be who we're called to be? What level of bringing the kingdom will we bring? All right. This brings up to me the issue of, it was mentioned by Shaul twice in his letters to Timothy, of fighting the good fight. I think we fight a lot of fights. I think we fight way too many fights that are not the good fight. Fight the good fight of emunah, the good fight of faith, as it's translated in English, the good fight of bringing the Messiah to bear on every situation. That's the good fight. When we bring the Messiah and his will and his ways to bear on every situation, that's emunah. We bring the Messiah out of hiding, out of our belly, into the world like a woman giving birth to a child. That's what emunah is, and the good fight of emunah is bringing Yeshua into the situation in real ways, in ways that impact the world. So that's the good fight. So, the good fight to which we're called in Messiah begins with learning how to highly value and prioritize and guard and defend and protect and steward the divine, precious gifts, the precious divine gifts. Which are they? Contentment, gratitude, joy, guarding, protecting, valuing contentment, gratitude, and joy, hope, gentleness, humility, patience, willingness to self-deny for the sake of the kingdom, and shalom. Valuing these things more than we value our flesh's desire to respond or react. Here's the thing we should learn during the wilderness wanderings and the season that we go through the wilderness every year through the Torah readings. We should learn that humanity in its fallen state is reactive. And it is reactive in the flesh. It is reactive in regard to how it feels about certain things and how certain things make your skin crawl, bring disgust or excite or stimulate envy or anger or offense. That's how our flesh, that's how humanity in its fallen state responds, it's reactive. We're reactive in the flesh. And that works its way into our pseudo-intellect, into our place where we actually justify our emotions. We justify it by logic and reason. We should be upset about this. We should be outraged about that. We should envy and be jealous of those people because they shouldn't have what they've got. We now logically make pseudo-intellectual decisions. We force our thought processes to conform to our emotions. This is the difference between Greek mindset and approach to life and Hebrew mindset and approach to life. The Greek mindset is feel something and then justify it with thought. Come up with a theory or come up with a position in your head that you can justify why you feel the way you feel and that you should do and act on those feelings. This is modern psychology. This is Greek. Let it out. What you feel is God. Let it out. But it's not. What you feel is in the flesh, and it's flesh. Now the issue is, what's the other side then? To value and to be proactive. The Holy One is always proactive when man is always reactive in the flesh. He's proactive in the Spirit. So he always is saying, how can we fit this? How can you fit this into my plan? How can you take this situation and change it into a realm which brings good? That's why his word is, he is always working all things together for good. The flesh says, no, this isn't good, can't ever be good because my flesh doesn't like it. My pseudo-intellect justifies why it doesn't like it. And the Holy One says, that's not the way this works. That's not the way the kingdom works. The kingdom doesn't work on how your flesh feels. It doesn't work on how your mind thinks. The kingdom works on whether this fits into my plan or whether it doesn't, and what we can do to make good come out of this. Now, this is that challenge. The good fight is to find a way to stay in touch with the plan of God to make good come of every situation. That means that we're going to have to subject our mind and our heart and our emotions and our flesh to the plan of God at all turns. And it is a challenge. It doesn't happen all at once. It is the ultimate goal, but it is something we should be progressing toward. We should be maturing in this. And so if you're not ready to jump in full speed and say, I can't do that, you say, I can't do that right now, then understand that's okay. We're going to keep moving in that direction. And where you start with is not where you're going to finish up. We're going to keep getting better and better at surrendering our thoughts, our emotions, our opinions, our attitudes, our belief systems to the Holy One and making good come out of every situation in the world. If, as and when, and to the extent we lose or lag behind in contentment or gratitude or joy or hope or goodness or humility or patience or willingness to self-deny or shalom, if, as and when, to the extent we lag behind or lack any of those factors, we are out of kingdom uniform. If you ever been around anyone or been in the military, you understand you have to be in uniform, especially for certain activities. You need to be in uniform. And if you're out of uniform, you do not represent your nation. You do not represent your branch of the service in that moment. Well, whenever we lose contentment, every time you lose contentment and you become discontent, this is why we can't complain. This is why we can't argue. This is why we can't get all up in our heads and our emotions. Because we're out of uniform. We're out of kingdom uniform. We're not representing the kingdom correctly because we're out of uniform. And not only become out of uniform, we become loose cannons. We become lone rangers. We become people who just want to do our own thing. We engage the one we perceive as our enemy because we can. We don't have rules of engagement. We don't have a bigger purpose. We just want to fight. We want to prove that we're right. We feel in need to do that. And then the Holy One says, no, you're a loose cannon. You're not part of my army. You're not part of me. And what happens is the loose cannons who don't have the uniform on, who don't keep the uniform on, and all of its different buttons and all of its different belts and all of its different hats, and have the contentment and the joy and the shalom and the humility and the gentleness and these things, and they become saboteurs. Claiming to represent the kingdom, they sabotage everything the kingdom's about. Every mission, every plan. Now, this is the challenge. If we're going to go into the land, if we're going to go across that Jordan, if we're going to go into the next phase of what he wants for us and actually have an impact upon our world for the positive, learning that we have been accepting things, allowing things, dealing with things, treating them as normal, that cannot continue. We just have to stop that stuff. No matter what the rest of the world does, our job is to be in kingdom uniform, follow rules of engagement, follow the protocols, and release the plan upon the earth. I want to talk about other things we do to prepare. The Holy One is going to talk in these parshas about apportioning the land. We're not even there yet. But he wants to make sure that we know that there is something waiting for us, some unique area, some sphere of influence that he has assigned to us before we ever get there. You need to look for it. You need to we're not here to, this is not a land rush. This is not Oklahoma in the early 1900s. It's not a land rush. He has a place prepared for us and a sphere of influence, a series of impact opportunities for us and a realm for us to go into. And that is where we need to be looking for and need to be attuned to going toward. Second thing he does is tell us what our boundaries are. He's going to define the boundaries of Israel, of the land of Israel, before we get there, so we know where it is. You know, it's kind of funny. If this is a very special land, then it is. If Israel, the Eretz Yisrael, is this land of special productivity and is a beachhead, is the landing place for the kingdom of heaven, and the operations center from which the kingdom of heaven is going to operate, we need to know where it begins and where it ends, where the lineage things are. We're supposed to do certain things when we enter the land, but we need to know where we enter the land. If we don't have an idea of our borders, of our boundaries, we don't know when we enter and when we don't enter. So he's going to tell us many things all through the Bible, all through the Torah. He's told us when you enter the land, when you come into the land. Many things about, even with regard to trees, fruit trees. First thing in Leviticus 19. What do you say? When you come into the land, the trees, when you plant, you will let them grow for 4 years. And the fifth, Orlah, the whole idea of special things about this. In this land, your fruit trees are to be special. He says, when you come into the land, he said, the land will enjoy a Sabbath. It'll be like, they're here, finally. And it will have a year of rest. And so many other things. When you go into the land when you go into the land, you'll wave your first fruit, your sheaf. When you'll celebrate the Passover. This is from Exodus 12. When you go into the land, all these things will happen. But we need to know where the boundaries are. So you're going to tell us where the boundaries are. Well, I won't go through all the boundaries, but he gives us a southern boundary. He starts with a southern boundary, I believe, western boundary, northern boundary, eastern boundary. Now, he's going to be very meticulous on the eastern boundary. The eastern boundary starts up in the Golan, comes down to the Sea of Galilee, or Kinneret, goes down the Jordan River Valley to the Dead Sea, to the end of the Dead Sea. That's the eastern boundary of Eretz Yisrael. Very important that we know that, because tribal trouble is going to hit us. He's already told us what the boundaries and the borders of the special land are, where we are called to go. And we're going to have two tribes and a half another tribe who are going to come up with another plan. Says, well, wait a minute. We don't want to go in there. We want to stay on the east side, other side of the Jordan River. What's the problem that Moshe initially saw? Well, two things. First thing he saw was, I'm sure, The Holy One just told you what the eastern boundary of the land is. It doesn't go over there. That's not part of the land. You're taking yourself out of the land of your inheritance. The second thing was, I think Moshe saw, and where he wound up focusing is, isn't this just more Joseph and his brothers? Aren't we just dividing up and not seeing the bigger picture? Not seeing the community, the plan? Are we just, what's good for you, your tribes? You want to have some land over here where there's you've seen some grass and you got some cows and some sheep and some oxen, and you want them over here, and you don't, aren't we dividing up what we're supposed to be working together as a unity, as a nation? Well, that's where the compromise was eventually reached. And Moshe's instructions were, okay, I'll accept your request if. And there was a condition. And the condition that Moshe placed on this request of letting the 2.5 tribes settle east of the Jordan, which was not part of the inheritance, was you must first go over in front of with the other tribes, and you must remain there until they have conquered their land, until they've conquered the land. Well, I don't know if Moshe knew this or he didn't. I don't know how much he saw into the future. The Holy One certainly did. Do you know how long it took for the tribes to conquer the land? Let me just give you a hint. They haven't done it yet. Now, I hope I give you a little different perspective on what Moshe said. When they have all conquered the land and taken full possession of the land, then you can go back to your place over there and have these other places. Now, that's an interesting process that the Holy One knew when Moshe is making these promises about the future, these vows, this whole issue of speaking what you don't know or what people don't know. And they said, we will do it. There's their vow. We will do it. Well, they should still be there. They should still be fighting because it's still not done yet. It was never completely arranged and done. Well, I hope you can see that process. Another thing that he tells us to do is when you go over, I want you to build 48 cities for Levites, special cities. There need to be places in your land that are designated receptacles of holiness for holy people to live and do holy things. And particularly, these 48 places are for the Levites who would train other people in the Torah, who would teach the Torah to the rest of the nation. So these 48 were spread out throughout the country, throughout the land, and they were to be the places, the centers of Torah education, Torah learning, where the whole world, all the nation, no matter where they lived, could learn the Torah. And then they would come to United, and they would do their service in the temple, of the tabernacle. Well, there was that, and then in addition, there were these 6 very special cities. 6 very special cities. And these special cities were called cities of refuge, Are, Miklai. Special cities of refuge. And it's very fascinating what they were for. The way they're described is they were to be cities to which the manslayer may flee from the avenger of blood. Now, hold on a minute. This is in the new land. This is the promised land. And we know we all get upset, and our flesh just freaks out whenever somebody does something really bad, like kill somebody. I mean, America burned last summer because of it. This is what happens, right? The avenger of blood goes crazy. The word spreads. Everybody gets upset in their emotions, and they go into riots and rants, and that's the way the world works. The avenger of blood. And the Holy One says, no, whenever someone does something and something really bad happens and somebody dies, I want to have you to have 6 places, one easily accessible to everybody, where the guy who is accused of it can run and be safe and not be allowed to be touched by the avenger of blood. And until there is an actual trial, until there is actual determination of whether or not he intended to do it, whether he laid in wait, whether there was a premeditation, as we would call it in the English jurisprudence, whether there was some level of actual culpability that deserved the death penalty, or not. That is not going to be determined by people out there hearing stories or seeing things in the news. That's not the way we do things. We don't let people get up on their opinion about what's right and what should be done, what shouldn't be done. That's to be determined by a judicial process governed by laws of due process. Torah spells out. 2 or 3 witnesses must be credible witnesses. They must actually speak in the presence of the adversary, of the one they accuse. There must be a beit din of responsible, respectable people who don't take bribes, who don't have a position in this fight, who don't have an argument. Not people out there in the world who have opinions and attitudes. Those people are not supposed to make decisions like this. People who are angry, people who are offended, people who are hurt, they're not supposed to be making these decisions. They're not supposed to be engaged in this process. That is the world's way, and that is how you're going to ruin everything about the kingdom if you let that happen. And so he has these 6 cities of refuge and 48 cities for the Levites to make centers of Torah education, training, responsibility. Wow. We've sort of gotten away from that viewpoint, haven't we? That our nation should be, and I'm not talking about America, I'm talking about the nation of the people of the Holy One, the kingdom of heaven, the children, the sons and daughters of the living God, the covenant people of the Holy One. We are supposed to be a shining light on a hill, a model of how to overcome the things that are killing the world, destroying the world. Vengeance and anger and offense and bloodlust and vindictiveness and hate. And we are supposed to be a model that actually demonstrates a higher and a better way. And so when you see yourself or your friends get on social media and make rash statements, show off their emotions, and get all up in their pseudo-intellectual opinions, or when you see or you hear at a workplace or at a family gathering all this anger and offense and negativity and self-righteous indignation, and understand how far we have yet to go. Understand why this world is not being improved by us, because we need to stand strong as being the example of the Holy One's light. Those who know what it's like to be touched by light, touched by mercy, touched by kindness, touched by forgiveness, touched by the healing hand of the Holy One, and therefore can extend it to other people. Well, we've reached the conclusion of the Torah, and here we are standing there looking over the Jordan River, Rift Valley. The land, the promise, the ultimate calling of God upon our lives awaits right over the next hill. We're almost on the clock. How will we respond? How will we act? How will we speak? How will we show we're different? How do we show we've been touched? How do we show we've been with the Holy One, that we belong to Him? How will we respond? It's up to us. Today's the day. So we say, as we conclude the Torah reading for another book of Torah, be strong, be strengthened, and may we all be strengthened together. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for joining us. Drop us a note. If you want questions about this parsha, the other parsha last week we didn't get to, Pinchas, then please put them in your notes on Facebook or on YouTube or other vehicles we have, and let us know how you're doing, where you are. Thank you for joining us. Thank y'all.